Uncle Bob's Light by Fergie. I grew up as Daddy's girl. I think, because I had no mother, my dad loved and cosseted me twice as much. I never lacked for anything, least of all, love. I grew up in a house full of adults. I was a rather precocious child. My dad worked hard. He worked as a shaft carpenter in the Kimberly Dia, Georgia house guest by Sir AB 21. My parents had the house I grew up in Lawrenceville, Georgia, built in 1986. My father has always been very strict about locking down the house. My mum worked mornings and my brother and I would be at school during the day on weekdays. My father worked nights, so he would be alone at the house most of th. A Dark Summoning by Vox_Anime. First, as of late I've been very interested in the pagan and Wicca religions. I've even gone as far as getting copies of rare grimoires. Something happened to me last night. Still not really sure what, but something. The eve of this happening I was reading a particular grimoire by the name of Traveling Shadow Spirit Visitors by Whispering Wind. To start off, my name is Kristen and I'm from Oklahoma. I have always been open-minded about ghosts, but never really knew much about shadow people, or shadow spirits. I first heard about shadow spirits in 2006, after my husband turned me on to listening to Coast to Coast AM, a radio program that died. The Spirit That Lives in My House by Carola Jean. I purchased my home 10 years ago. It was built in 1880. I did not notice anything unusual in a paranormal way, until I had lived there for about 7 years. I would hear static and words I could not understand, like an old radio broadcast. I thought it was the neighbors, or a car going by. I was Street Shadow with Changing Eyes by Leonard. I have read most of the accounts on this shadow with red eyes and I believe that I have been followed my whole life by something similar. When I was a child, I used to be found talking to the ceiling in my bedroom and my parents said I described my friend as black with red eyes. They told me a frightful appearance by Draconis. All names have been avoided to protect the identities of those I love, and wish to avoid causing them any more stress than they already have to deal with. I am going to begin with some background information. January 2009, I was at my concert choir practice on a Saturday morning when I found out Miss Brown's Ghost by Pagina book. When I was around 6 years old, my parents bought a house in Northern Virginia from an older woman who had lived in the house with her sister for years. I remember they said her name was Miss Brown. Her sister had passed away in the house, in the master bedroom, so she decided to sell the house and my new house for a fresh start to buy IFSE 99. In the last part of my last story, I was talking about the breed being moved and the feeling of not being alone. Just to sum it up, has anyone ever noticed that sometimes when you shut a door, one or two throughout the house would shut too? Well, I had noticed that when you would open the front door, am I being followed by a spirit or two? By Orangate Tangerine. There's always been a lot. I mean, looking back on it, I guess I've always been a little out there. Things have always happened to me and I never really knew why. When I was 4, I moved from Virginia to Florida and I barely remember things from Virginia, but I remember seeing this man. It was Chris. A haunting never to forget by Miss Stay. Growing up in Los Angeles and loving shows such as Supernatural, Ghost Hunters, etc., and movies like Paranormal Activity, I always believed in ghosts. When I was really young, I had an imaginary friend whose name was Rose. No one else could see her but me, and I thought she was my imaginary friend. The Headless Horseman by Eazy-E. To start it off, I never actually got to see the apparition myself. My mother did. She told me the story recently. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, the story starts out in a small town in Mexico. It's 3 o'clock and my mom was walking home with her friends from this dance they were attending. Negative Spirit by Bones. My trouble started about 4 years ago. I have lived in my home for a long time, since July '97 to be exact, and my home was a warm cozy place, a happy family life. However, as of 4 years ago things changed. I went from having a happy family to one that was dysfunctional. The first thing was Jizz. The Fireman by Shadow Wolf 130. This happened to me when I was about 7 years old, my first otherworldly visit. An unpleasant one at that. I remember doing as my mother had told me before I went to bed. Then, of course, I did go to bed. This night I felt very cold and I awoke from my sleep. I walked across my bedroom floor. The experience I remember most about Iraq by Ghost Cricket. I have had experiences before. But the series of events made me completely aware that what we see is not always all that is there. During my first deployment in 2004, I was stationed at Camp Anaconda, pretty much in the heart of Iraq. After my unit had settled in, we were given the Unfortuna. The Fireplace Ghost by Shelzy. This is the first paranormal experience that I ever had. It took place at my grandma's home and I was 7 years old. My grandma lived in a suburb of Melbourne called St Kilda and lived on Crimea Street. Many of the houses in St Kilda were built in the late 1800s to the early 1900s and many were man's. My mom, the Channeler by Pyagina book. My mother is a channeler and has always been able to speak to spirits since she was little. As a teenager I grew very interested in the paranormal and my mom was aware of this, so one day she decided to tell me about her gift. She has shared some stories of things that happened to her with me from Ye Home Alone experience by Mizumu Vampire. My family can see ghosts and spirits and I always hoped that I could see a ghost or a spirit. Before my encounter I believed in paranormal activity, but my own experience was freaky. This experience happened on 25th February 2012 at 9 p.m. I was home alone sitting in my room reading, when suddenly I see The Girl in the Doorway by Silver Bear. My first violent experience was in the back of the house I grew up in. I lost my grandmother at the age of 12. I went headlong into a mass depressive state, and nose-dived into Satanism without doing any research. I wanted my grandmother back, and negating that I wanted to tear down the world. RO. A Small Girl by Preeti Not Scared. Friends, this is something which scared me a lot. My examinations got over yesterday. I was too happy that my examinations got over. As usual, my mom was not in the home when I returned from school. I switched on the TV and started watching my favorite movie. My cell phone rang and it was my mom. SH. Terrifying Tour by 345 Assassin 42. I had just come back from vacation in the UK and have two really interesting stories to share. I'll tell the second one in another story. Well, to start it all off, me and a couple friends decided to go on vacation to the UK to get away from work and daily hardships. We decided to go and check out Bedside Spirit by Paranormal__girl. This is a true thing that happened, and I wish to find out if I'm going crazy or if this is the real deal. A bit of a backstory: my entire family can either see, speak, or feel spirits. I'm a lucky one and got the ability to feel when they are around. I just awakened this gift and it's a bit fr. Child in the Office Campus by Adsuza. I work with an IT services organization. There are quite a few late nights involved. And some of the offices across the country are at very troublesome locations in terms of transport and accessibility. Last night, I was out for a smoke break with a colleague. And we were having a pleasant time. Annoying Entity by 13-year Stormat. It all began when I was 15 years old. My stepfather was the preacher in the church we attended in the Tyler, Texas area. Therefore my family was very involved and active members. One night, I laid down in bed. Shortly after felt as though I was suffocating. There was nothing I could do to help me. White Smoke and Darkness by Atumo. I guess I should start by saying that strange things have happened to me frequently ever since I was a child, but I always shrugged them off as coincidences or ignored them for the sake of my sanity. One incident, however, stands out to me among many because it was different from anything that I had. Seeing Shadows and Feeling Bad Things in My Home by Nikki 10. My husband and I moved into our house nearly 3 years ago, which is a new build, and we are the first owners. However, this past year or so, I have had some strange encounters. One morning, my husband had an early shift and left the house at 4:30 in the morning. My alarm was due to go off and I Put a Spell on You by Sid Eagle. This story starts 20 years after my parents returned from Italy. They had recently divorced, and I was living with my mom in our old house in Brazil. The mood at home was not great, as we mourned the death of our old family life. My mom did her best to keep us entertained, and things seemed to slowly. Autism and being psychic by Shane X. I have Asperger's syndrome, which is in the autism spectrum, and I can sense when there are spirits around but not see them. Or sometimes I have premonitions which came true. When I was a little girl, I could feel a presence of a 6-year-old girl who died at our house, and she used to play tricks on me. Everywhere and Everything by Dreamweaver. Both of my parents were gypsies. I grew up with a semi-nomadic life. My mom and dad believed in ghosts, I did not. Still, I don't really know what to think. There are so many strange things I have witnessed in my life that I would love to find the answers, but scared of the truth, I guess. Now A Glass of Milk by Kelsey Collins. Before I start, I'll give you the backstory and such. In 2005, my family had a house fire in our basement. My room was in the basement. Luckily, the night it happened, I slept upstairs. We had no home for months and had to live in a camper in our driveway until our house was repaired. And I also lost him. A Gift or a Curse? By Diala_819. I guess that even though most of the events that have occurred to me take place in Baton Rouge, I feel that it is important I start my story from when I was a child and lived in Mexico. As far as I can remember, I've always been a little different from everyone else. I really can't remember him. The Shadows in My Life by Teenage Witch 21. In my last story, I told about the shadow of a man, possibly my dad, in my bedroom. I have recently been thinking of other experiences I have had throughout my life. For as long as I can remember, I have been able to see/sense things that are around me and the people I'm with. When I was 5, I moved. Never Alone by Star26. I have been reading stories on this site for quite some time now. This is my first time posting to the site, so please forgive me for any grammar issues or punctuation issues. Well, this has been happening my entire life. My mother and my pastor believe it all started when I was born. A little bit. Grandmother's Appearance by Deadbert98. I will start the story with stating that this happened back in 1992. I was in elementary school on an Air Force base when my father's mother, my grandmother, decided to move in with us to help my recently divorced father care for my 2 brothers and me. After about 2 months, my grandmother force pressing down against my waist by the Wixiapa. Best place to start would be Monday night. Me and a friend were home alone in my house, and we decided to try summoning, so we read up on some incantations and did what was required. Shortly after, my friend started to get rather spooked. I don't know if she was pretending or not, as I didn't read. Demon Following My Boyfriend to by Cantonelli 3. Due to the suggestions I have gotten on here, I tried the simple ones last night. He is not up to blessing the house, saying it won't leave. I decided to have my best friend Hillary stay the night at Joe's last night, March 13, 2012. Who all was there was Joe, his roommate Mike, Hillary, and myself. A Frightening Childhood by Sophifione. I remember being frightened all the time. Scared. Like something was always waiting for me in the next room. It all began when I moved into an old villa, built in the early 1900s. I was 7 years old. My brother, who was only 5 at the time, and I were so excited. My father renovated the house sheer. My grandma's Doppelganger by Diverson. So in 2006, it was my senior year of high school, and I had a very creepy experience involving my grandma. At the time I was living with my grandma, just me and her. I had only been living there for about 4 months, and nothing supernatural happened before or since this experience in that house. Have The Late Night Woman by A Thursday Whimsy. I'm unsure of exact dates because my experience occurred throughout 2011 on an irregular basis and has since diminished, or at least dimmed, within the beginning of 2012. One of the many rules within my household is to be in bed at a respectable time. However, since it was the holidays and my Ouija experience and possession by Kirko Bezirko. Before I start my story, I would like to begin with this quote which, based on my experiences with the Ouija, is completely and utterly true. Most often the spirits whom are contacted through the Ouija board are those whom reside on the lower astral plane. These spirits are often very confused. Demons, ghosts, and everything in between by Grim Reaper 24. I have lived in my apartment for about 5 years now, and I'll admit that I'm not a stranger to seeing ghosts or experiencing forms of the paranormal, but living here, I have gotten more experience than I could have ever asked for. 5 months after I moved into my apartment is when the activity. Gates of Hell, The Cassie Cemetery by Illuminati 33. My experience with the Gates of Hell has been a very eye-opening and somewhat amazing experience that is hard to believe even happened in the series of events that it did. I believe all things happen for a reason, and the synchronicity of these events have even further convinced me that this is true. Family House I Want to Forget by Angelaturner 001. I am sharing our experience of the supernatural because it made a believer out of me. Our family house in Simonstown, Western Cape, South Africa is a large old house that we renovated after my mother passed away in 2001. Since my sister and I were both renting at that stage, we decided to share our incubus or something else. Please help by Eternalitas. I don't really know how to describe what's been interacting with me for the past 2 nights now, or if it is an incubus of some sort due to its behavior differing from accounts of others being attacked, which is why I decided to share with all of you and see if you could help me. I'm not scared or F. Little Ghost by Angelaturner 001. My fiancé accepted a job offer in Dubai. We decided that I would stay in South Africa with our 2 dogs Sally and Mike. During this time we also moved house and I had to stay with my sister and her family for 2 weeks before I could move into our new home with our 2 dogs. Our dogs were not allowed in him. The Man in the Graveyard by Taper 23. Like many of you on here, I have also seen weird things since I was a little kid. The two that stick out the most happened in the same area when I was living in Portland, Oregon with my parents and my little sister. We lived in a pretty old neighborhood. I remember the road was not even a paved one. Ghosts Who Help by Prakar_608. My name is Prakar and I am a resident of Jaipur, Rajasthan. I am 19 years old. The experience I am going to share with you is something that happened with my dad back in 1992 when I wasn't even born. My dad often tells us about it. My mom and dad got married in 1991 and this is an experience of an Home Alone Horrors by Jenny T. I've experienced a few strange things before and I felt the urge to finally post something. I've been reading stories on this site for a while and only just begun to comment. This happened when I was a teen, and I've never forgotten it. A lot of strange things happened in that house. First of all, Scream by Soran Zengel. My story is of a night maybe 3 to 4 days after I had messed around with a Ouija board. I know it's not a toy and I didn't look at it as such, nor did I mess with it like it was. Okay, so here is my story. I should also mention before you read on that this took place in 2007 I believe. So, I don't. He Stole My Keys by Applesauce 27. After my first story submission, someone wanted to hear more about my husband's father. I wanted to share this story of when I first met my husband. It's a lighter-hearted one than my last, but one I think of fondly. When I first met my husband, we had a lot in common, such as our parents both be shapeshifters and Gold by Vidya_Amani. I saw a creature that looked like a goblin, looking like some tree spirit, very small but mischievous. I can't say it had pointy ears but rather sticks and branches coming out of it. It had shape-shifted into a tree trunk, looking like it had a belly ready to burst with the wood cracking open. And My Furry Friend and The Signs from Beyond by Acuity Angles. Mika was the cat I had through a large majority of my childhood. She was the most beautiful, but ornery, Siamese Himalayan mix, and my mom named her Makalu, after the famous peak in the Himalayas, probably because it was the only word she knew that had anything to do with the Himalayas or that region. Dark Thing Around Pregnant Woman by Vidya_Ramani. My mother and father have these strange friends. They are farm people. Their children are not allowed to go to public school due to racial issues or financial savings. They don't have farm workers and do everything themselves, probably due to hating black people. They live a very isolated life, like. My niece is seeing ghosts. I think my family is cursed by Kinley. Last night my older sister and niece, her child, were watching the television. My sister took my niece to use the restroom before she fell asleep to help and prevent her from wetting the bed, because she is only 4 years old. When they went back into the bedroom, my niece started to scream and cry. Grandma's Visit by Taper23. When I was about 7, me, my mom, and my sister were living in Portland, Oregon. We had moved there from Utah right after my mom's divorce with my real dad. We lived, like I mentioned before in my other story, in a really old area and a tiny old house. I remember going through some weird stuff when I visit her in the basement by Taper23. My grandma used to be crazy obsessed with genealogy and family history. I remember in my grandparents' house growing up they had, as most basements go, a creepy basement. My grandma had a room down there fully dedicated to family history. It was cram-packed full of books, journals, piles and piles. A Message from Beyond by Lyra Enoch. It started out like any other night. Me and my friend Rebecca, Joseph and Harge were just watching TV and we got really bored, and then one of us, I can't remember who, suggested that we use the old Ouija board that I had found a couple of weeks before when I cleaned out my garage. I didn't think much. Hello Again by Flamex. My granddad's 2nd anniversary was today, but I only found out after a number of things happened to me and some of my family today. While I was working in the creek earlier today, I felt something touch off the back of my head like a gentle tap of someone's hand as I was bending down to pick up. Name written in the paint by Buttercup49. My daughter is opening a nursery in Surrey and we have been busy painting and decorating for the last 3 months. When in the hall I always feel that someone is watching me from the top of the staircase, and even though I have a t-shirt, hoodie, fleece and body warmer on, I feel icy cold and it feels it. Why is all this happening? By Power Off 9 Forever. So my story starts when I moved into a small town in Colorado. Ever since I was young I would feel things watching me, wind out of nowhere just pass by me, and noises. Lots of noises. My parents have told me stories about when I was younger, they would see me talking to nothing. I even have memories. Blood's Point Nightmare by Tori93. This story takes place on 2 separate nights. My best friend Mandy and I read about Blood's Point Road in Illinois online, and we decided to go there at night and see if any of it was true. It was said that there will be a car that will follow you as soon as you turn onto Blood's Point Road and Paul. I saw a homeless man die and now I think he is haunting me by Acuity Angles. I moved into the 2nd floor of my building about a year ago. A few weeks after moving in, I met a homeless man that sleeps at the back of my building in a doorway that has a small awning over it. Though his bed was on the opposite side of the building, he spent most of his time near the front ender. The Man in the Flannel Shirt by Charlotte Tybalt. I'm 18 years old now, and for the past few months I've had this one man appear in my bedroom. I don't know exactly what he is. I heard from some people that this man might be my spirit guide due to the fact that whenever I see him I don't feel afraid. I had this experience a few weeks ago with Jim. My grandmother's dead husband spoke to me by Acuity Angles. About a year and a half ago, my father asked if I would like to accompany him to West Covina, California to visit my grandfather. I wasn't too excited about visiting him. He is quite the male chauvinist, but knew the visit would give me an opportunity to visit my grandmother's grave. She had passed. Grandmother spoke to grandfather by Aunt Sousa. First of all, I must say that I love my grandmother a lot. As a kid, I was her favorite and was pampered to the core by her. She had some funny ways to deal with things, and the memory of each instance makes me smile. One such instance was when I was at my grandaunt's place in Goa, India for the poltergeist activity at childhood home by Chirth Banshee. This is about my childhood home which I lived in until I was 12. Strangely, things out of the ordinary only started happening when I was about 10. I only have one experience that happened to me personally. I would like to tell you about this. Right, so basically me, my mom, my baby sister and my brute. A wooden wagon in the forest by Ghost_Seeker. This is a story my mother described to me just after the night that happened. This, however, happened a couple years ago. So here it is. My family and I live in the northern part of New Mexico on a reservation. We lease a couple of cattle ranges and we were staying at one of them for a weekend. A brief crystal baby by Wanda struck. My mom has always called me a crystal baby, meaning that I am very spiritual and connect with the dead. I have had a lot of experiences with the paranormal. I was born in 1994 and I wouldn't have even been 9 months old when stuff started to happen. It all started when my mom and I moved into an wake up I freaked_out. This has only ever happened once, but ever since it happened I have trouble sleeping. I live in New Haven, Miles. One night about 3 years ago, I can't remember the date exactly. I woke up in the middle of the night and the first thing I noticed is that I can't move at all. I can see okay, I can blink. My wife says she is haunted by ghosts by Soldier Guy 29. My wife has maintained throughout our relationship that she has been haunted by a ghost. I tend to be skeptical of this, but would like someone else's opinion of this. My first experience with it was several years ago. We had both fallen asleep, but several hours later I woke up to find the bedroom. Former Skeptic's Journal to buy scoops. It's been a long while since I posted here, and I've been keeping a journal like Miracles and Granny suggested. If you want my background, feel free to read up on my other entries. Here is a continuation of my journal entries from where I left off the last time I submitted. I included mood and time. A Visit from Mom by Jules Vnes. I woke with such a start that my body had automatically bolted itself into an upright position. For some reason, unknown to me, I had an overwhelming feeling that I was being observed. Even though my eyes were still blurry from sleep and not quite cooperating, I frantically searched the immediate The Giant Forest Jumper by Kahindi. Before anything, I would like to inform the kind readers of this story that, being French, English is not my mother tongue. Consequently, I apologize in advance for any misspelled word or oddly coined sentence you may and surely will find in the following account. I did my best, as far as I can. Just a couple of things I've encountered by XBFALCO and 74. My name is John and I live in a little country town in Queensland, Australia. I've seen a few odd things in my relatively short lifetime and I'd like someone to hear them without thinking I'm nuts, so here we go. Cars and phantom automobiles. To start this off, I have to say my family is a very scared and needing help by Jenna. My name is Jenna and I live in a country town in NSW. I have always had an interest in the paranormal, and when things would go *bang* during the night, I was always excited to find out what it was. But now lately, things have been starting to creep me out. For the past few weeks, when everyone is in Trail of Darkness by New Boom. This story event happened to be the most terrifying, eye-opening, and thrilling experience I have ever had. It is something I will never forget and brings goosebumps all over my body when I start to think about it. It all started when I was with my friend Hannah up north looking up Haunted Childhood Home by Forest 23. As a child I experienced a lot of unexplainable stuff. The house I grew up in was a 5-bedroom detached house in a lovely neighborhood with a big garden stretching back with a park on the opposite side. We were the first occupants of this house, but I must admit I am very happy to have moved on. My Boyfriend's House by Danny Baby. This event, or should I say events, took place at my boyfriend's house. I now currently live with him, but anyways, the actual first time I went to his house was when everything started up again. Let's wind back a little bit. As for you who haven't been on my profile yet, I am able to see, hear, speak. Hubbub by mannerisms. I know it has been a while and I have not had the time between university and work to be able to sit down and write. However, here is a new one for you. Now I know you have read my stories before. A child will always be afraid of the dark. They just need to learn boundaries. I've got a G. Grandpa, Grandma, where is everyone? By mannerisms. Here is something I could use a little bit of help with. Recently I started hearing my grandmother, and trust me, I know that voice even though I have not heard it since I was 4, she has a way with words. Anyways, what I am trying to figure out is lately she is constantly saying my name over and multiple occurrences in Haunted Apartment by J. Johnson 1710. This happened when I was about 14 years old. I lived in a small apartment with my younger sister, 9, and my parents in New York. My sister and I shared a room. The apartment layout was in such a way that my bedroom served as a walkthrough to my parents' bedroom. At one end was a door that connected to TH. Was I possessed? By Nikapo. About 2 years ago I moved in with a friend, Kurt, fully aware that his house was haunted. I had stayed the night a few months prior, being woken up to singing and muffled conversation. At first we thought it was his mother, but upon further inspection she had already left the house for work. Hectares. Homemade Ouija board took time to burn by Crying Rose. Hey there. Finally I have got this site to get rid of my incident which I have had with a Ouija board last year. It happened in 2011.07.21, we were 4 friends, let's name them B, C and myself me. We were at B's house enjoying our weekend where suddenly B mentioned that she always felt that S. New Believer by Goranai Jawan. My name is Gauri and I am a 31-year-old single mother to a baby boy, who will be 2 years in May this year. I live in New Delhi, India. I never believed in ghosts and paranormal until about 7 months ago when it actually happened with me. I am very new to this, so I apologize if my experience is not Spirit That Doesn't Sleep by I Love Mexican Food. My name is Ava and I'm from Houston, Texas. My experience began when I was 13 or 14 years old, maybe even younger. But my scary one began one winter night in my room I shared with my 2 sisters. One slept alone and the other slept with me. The room was so dark but I had my gas heater on, so we had some Swimming with the Spirit by Forrest 23. I have always been best friends with my cousin and we try to see each other at least every month, usually at his house because we have a group of friends in the area. For the past 5 years we have been going down to a nearby circular lake that feels as if it is completely isolated from the world. 4. Uncertain by Moonfall. I am new to the site and do not have much experience with the paranormal as I might possibly like. I have been a silent reader for a few years, however. There are a few similar events that have happened since 2005 that I can't quite figure out. To share a little about me with you, I don't see. Whistling Dixies by Mulder81. This story is the most recent update of my previous Whistler stories. This story is in 2 parts. The first happened in late 2011, and the second last month in January 2012. Early winter here in southern Minnesota was one of the mildest and warmest we have had. My wife was redoing the breezeway. Birthday at Rotary Park by Jessica Vision 1989. The year was 2009. It was October 5th, my 20th birthday. My boyfriend, at the time, was at work, and I was at his parents' house. His stepmom and I had a fun day shopping and dining out. Autumn made the scenery so beautiful that day in southeast Michigan. The night was slowly approaching. Lorien. A Visit from the Daily Departed. By Will 1974. This story happened to me in 2001, which is a year that was very turbulent for me. I lost both my mother and father that year, and what happened to me one cold winter night, I will never forget. It was a late cold night in November of 2001. I awoke to a headache and decided to head to my bathroom. Red Rectangle by Nookie. Twice in my life I have seen what can only be called a translucent red rectangle. The first time, my dad and I were in our barn having a huge argument. I don't remember what we were arguing about, but there were my dad, a friend, and I. The friend was trying to calm us both down, but having no s. Creature in the Dark by Ahmad_V. This is not my experience but my ex's that she narrated to me. I am sharing this with you so that we can discuss about this incident if you find it noteworthy. She was living in a duplex that was newly constructed. The venue in this incident is in Maharashtra, and was surrounded by few other. Holiday in Wales by Tiny Tinker. My parents, my brother, my husband, our 2 children and I were staying in a holiday cottage in North Wales. It was a 16th century Drovers Inn that had been converted to a holiday let. We arrived and I took my then 14-month-old daughter upstairs to change her. The building looked very old and empty. Talking to David by Chelsea. I had often heard that young children are more open to the spiritual world, and the below experience definitely made up my mind that this can certainly be true. The experiences happened to my best friend's son some years ago, which we still talk about from time to time. Going back about 13 years. Afraid for My Daughter by Fucknafen. My family and I have been in our house for 6 months now. Until this morning the only experiences that have happened have been by my wife, which I have kind of disregarded and attributed to being in a new place. She says she has felt uncomfortable and seen a few fleeting shadows here and there. My Encounters with a Demon by Prekaya. Let me start by saying I'm new to this site, but I've been interested in the paranormal all my life. Well, from when I could understand it anyway. I'm 20 now, by the way. I love to read about people's experiences, the occult, witchcraft, mythology, etc. I am not religious in any way, but I'm not on. The Dollhouse Ghost by Captain Alexandria. Ever since I was little, I and my family would go and stay at my grandmother's for the weekend every other month. She lived in a little cottage in what seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. She had 2 spare bedrooms which I and my brother used, and Mum and Dad would sleep on the sofas. Anyway, in my Ghost Girl at My Family Beach House by Pisalova Quacklet. At one point I was at my cottage in Florida last summer. It was built in 1907 and bought by my great-grandfather a few months after it was built. Before there were other beach houses, but soon plowed down because they were falling apart. I think they were built in the 1800s. I stayed in a room. What Watches Us When We Sleep? By Steffi 2001. I would like to share with you an experience that happened 2 nights ago. Also, to share with you how my mind deals with unexplainable things, and in doing so, perhaps help some of you with your experiences. I'll keep this short. 2 nights ago, I was sleeping in bed, as usual. For some reason of Billy, One of a Kind by Fergie. Billy was one of a kind. He was my husband's friend, and a constant visitor at our home. My husband met him sometime in the early 70s. He wasn't like anyone we had ever known before. He was a showman, and ate razor blades and did fire eating, to entertain people. He was an extrovert and laughed